Hello, everyone. I'm Traci Arieli, end of life doula and founder of Comforting Closure. Welcome to another episode. Most of us grow up learning how to love people. Very few of us are taught how to grieve them. When someone we love dies, we often find ourselves in unfamiliar territory. We are left asking questions like, what do I do with this grief? How do I carry it? How do I stay connected to the person I lost? For today's guest, part of that answer was found in the ocean. Dan Fischer is the founder of the One Last Wave Project. After his father died from pancreatic cancer, Dan began spending time surfing as a way to process his grief. At one point, he wrote his father's name on his surfboard and paddled out into the water. That simple act became something much larger. Today, the One Last Wave Project carries the names of loved ones into the ocean on surfboards around the world. Families submit the names of people they have lost, and those names become part of a shared moment of remembrance. In our conversation today, Dan shares the story of his father, what those final years together meant to him, how the experience of grief led him to create this project, and the powerful role that nature can play when we are moving through loss. Most importantly, this conversation offers something many grieving people need: permission. Permission to grieve in your own way, permission to stay connected to the people you love even after they die. So grab a warm drink, find a comfortable seat, and join us for the conversation. Dan, welcome, and thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me and the beautiful introduction.
Thank
Talk
you.
about all this.
Thank you. Now, Dan, I'd like to begin with your father. Can you tell us a little bit about him?
So my father, Carl Fischer, he was a man of many different things. He was a very passionate man, a dreamer, very driven, very stubborn, very creative as well. And I think that all blended together to create someone who had big dreams and really went out and was able to achieve all those dreams. So he was a very successful architect. He was a great athlete. He became a farmer later on in life, returning to his roots. He was a pilot. He was so many things, an incredible friend of mine, a mentor. And I think really at the core, he was just a gentle soul that was sort of locked in a tough exterior and trying to find his way through the world in that way. Wonderful family man, and unfortunately he passed after an 8-year battle with pancreatic cancer in 2019, just before all of our worlds were sort of thrown upside down.
He does sound amazing. He really does.
Yeah, he
Thank you
was.
for sharing
Sure.
sharing that. Now, I know the last time we spoke, you told me about cycling the Alps d'Huez together. And I love that story because
Mhm.
while I haven't cycled it, I've done it on Zwift and I know it's tough. So I cannot even imagine. Can you tell us about that experience and what it meant to you?
Sure, yeah, it was what a memorable trip for so many reasons. So I think in the end of his life, my dad became very reflective of the things he had done, the things he hadn't done, the people around him, became more introspective, more caring, more loving, more open in so many ways. And one thing that he tried to do in the last year to 6 months of his life was connect with each person that was of importance to him in his life that he loved, and really offer them an opportunity to have a shared experience. And that could be, a final dance in the living room with my mom when he wasn't really able to move anymore. For me, that was helping me achieve one of my dreams, and that was to cycle up Alpe d'Huez, which, as a cyclist, it's it's a it's an incredible feat for anyone who's very, very fit. And it was something that I always dreamed of doing. And we were actually there in 2004 to follow the tour through France. And unfortunately, I came down with a horrible bout of heat stroke after watching a few of the stages high up in the mountains. And I was unable to actually be there for that historic time trial up Alpe d'Huez. And I always dreamed of going back. And so then I guess 20 years later or so, my mom had suggested maybe we could try doing that and go back. And my dad would jumped on it right away, even though this was 6 months before he passed away and was in no shape to leave the house, let alone fly halfway across the world and have his hand at one of the hardest mountains ever to climb. So we did, and we made it there. I remember the morning of we got to the base of the mountain, and he had fallen about 3 times in the mile ride to the base of the mountain. And I said, Dad, this is not going to be the day for us. We can do it another time when you're feeling a little stronger. But he knew I wanted to do it, and so we did. And he told me to go ahead, and I made it up to the top of the mountain, achieved that dream that I always wanted to. I was ecstatic to finally do that. I didn't think I was going to make it up because it is incredibly, incredibly hard. And I doubted myself so many times going up there. And I always had his voice in my head that was just always so encouraging and, never giving up. That's just how he lived his life. And I waited for him. I didn't know where he would be, how far behind. And after an hour or so, when he didn't show up, I tried calling his phone. There was no reception. And so I ended up cycling back down the 21 hairpin turns, not all the way, but I think I met him at the eighth or ninth turn. And I pulled up next to him and asked him, what's taking you so long? Just jokingly, what's going on? And he said, oh, I just pulled off to the side of the road and took an hour nap because that's what he felt like doing. That was who he was. He lived his life on his own terms and adjusted accordingly as he got older and weaker with the disease, but it never stopped him. And so we just continued up the rest of the mountain together. And it was such a memorable experience to do that with my dad, one last time, another adventure we were on, and just reminded me of all the times we had done things together. That was what we really bonded over. And for him to be able to give that to me at a time in his life where most people wouldn't be walking, let alone doing what he did, was just incredible and something that will stay with me forever.
Well, I bow down to your not once but twice or 1.5 times. I'm impressed. So next is
Yeah.
Everstream. That's like 10 times up. So no.
Yeah.
You're like, nice, no. Now your
That
father,
was splendid.
he taught you, it sounds like through his 8 years, he really taught you how to live by example. When I work with people, I know people who are sick, they grieve also as they're sick. Um, and I was wondering, what did he teach you about grieving? He taught you how to live. Did he teach you anything about grieving as he was getting sicker?
Yeah, I think there was probably many things observing him, the courage that he had going through it. I know for myself, and we discussed this, that you're taught how to love, but you're not taught how to grieve. And so when you're faced with it, you don't really know what to do. And everyone has a different way through it. And for him, as he was going through his struggles, what was so admirable and not at all surprising because of who he was is he never stopped living his life. He always did it on his own terms. From the day he was born until the day that he died, he did it on his own terms. And that was difficult for some people to live with. But it was so inspiring to see. So he'd
Mm.
be he'd be in the cancer ward getting his chemotherapy, and he set up this mobile office where he'd have his architectural drawings FedEx to him or shipped to him so that he can continue working. And it was, we have images of it. It was incredible. It was like a little mini office inside of where everyone else is tapped up, just hanging on to try to survive. And that's how he was. It was from beginning to end. I mean, even when he was in the palliative ward, when the doctors finally told him that he wasn't, and us, that he wasn't going to live much longer, it was days to weeks after an 8-year battle with it, where they constantly told us, he's going to die within 3 months or something, prepare yourselves. He never allowed that to happen because he stayed so driven and focused. And I think that was a huge part of how he coped with it all. But he wasn't going to die in the palliative ward. He wanted to die in Vermont, we were in Montreal at the time. So across the border in Vermont, in the house that he built for us, in the room that he built for us with big windows so he could look out across the farm to see the Highland cattle that he raised that he wanted there. That's how he wanted to pass. So what he had to do and what he did was he woke up every morning. Every night at 2 a.m., but I slept in the hospital with him for about a month. And I'd wake up to him waking up, to getting his walker to walk up and down the hallways to prove to them that he could leave, that he was healthy enough to leave. And so we did. And we broke him out of the hospital and smuggled him across the border, which was so strange when you reflect back on his life, because he was a Hungarian immigrant and his family escaped the Hungarian Revolution by smuggling themselves across the border in a hay wagon. And at the end of his life, he did a very similar thing. And we got him down to Vermont. I remember the evening that we got there, he sat on his couch, he had a margarita. We watched Stand By Me, his favorite movie. And he just enjoyed his life for the last week, surrounded by his family, listening to his music. And he went out his way. And that was the lesson that I learned was, death was inevitable for him, but how he chose to live, that was his choice. And that's what he did. And it was so inspiring to see that beautiful stubbornness that he had to live life his way. And that was probably the greatest lesson that I ever took.
I love these stories because I really feel like I know your father and just at least
Yeah,
a big part of him. And he just sounds so amazing. Thank you.
he was, of course.
Now, I know that surfing became an important part of how you processed your grief. What what happens for you when emotionally when you're on the board?
There's a lot of emotion now. It didn't used to be that way for me. Surfing was just something that I did. And then when I was going through my grief journey, I think certainly the first few years were, feeling a lot of paralysis in action mixed with chaos of emotions, not knowing where to turn, not knowing how to live, not knowing how to grieve. And I think it took a while for me to start reconnecting to ways that felt positive in that all. And I know that that's not always the easiest thing to do. So when I started turning to the ocean, it was in part that I started looking at the bond that I shared with my dad. And a lot of that was based around adventure and challenging our physical limits. And so the ocean was very receptive to that mindset. And it's also a place where it's filled with life, it's filled with uncertainty, the vastness of it all. And when there's emotions there, I think grief in itself fills you with an incredible sense of stress. It stresses your system. So being in nature, whether that's in the woods, in the ocean, for me it was the ocean because I live close to it. It's a place that receives that and soothes the stress inside of you, whether that's the salt water of it or just the non-judgmental aspect of it where it just allows you to sort of rest with your own emotions when you're there. So it's very welcoming. And what I started to realize more and more is when someone is grieving or has been through trauma or is feeling challenged in their life in some way, a lot of times they're they're looking for something that connects them to the past. It's sort of looking in the rear view mirror. For me with grief, it was how do I connect to those memories again? How do I find that love that was back there? But with surfing and with the ocean, it forces you to be almost forward looking in a positive way because you have to be reading the surf reports. What are the waves doing in a few days, in a week, in a month? So it causes you to be optimistic about the future. And that is something that's very scary when you're so stuck on looking behind and in the past. You don't think about the future. The future is scary. Whereas with this, I think that's a lot of times why it's used for people who are grieving or through trauma because it does keep them motivated looking forward. And then the act of surfing itself is a place that causes you to be very present. So in order to catch a wave, you need to be at the right place, at the right time, on the right day, on the right wave, in the right conditions, on the right place on the board, paddling at the right speed, and all of this to hopefully catch a wave and ride it for a few seconds of euphoria. All the while, as you're riding this wave, you know that at any given second, that wave could crash down upon you. And so it's an example of life and how to appreciate those moments of life, whether they're positive or negative. Appreciate the positive moments, know that those negative ones are not here to last. And so that surfing for me is so representative of the whole life journey. You know, you're anticipating what's going to be happening in the future, and then here, especially in Rhode Island, it's freezing cold temperatures. You put on a thick wetsuit, you go and battle yourself against the waves, getting pushed back over and over and over again. Finally, you get out there and find some solitude and hope all the elements line up perfectly in order to have a moment of bliss, knowing that that moment might end. And you have to appreciate the whole journey all the way through. So it's a place for me that is so welcoming and non-judgmental of the emotions I'm feeling through grief, but also some place that's so healing for me and allows me to understand every moment in life is important for a reason. And that's what it was for me. I didn't realize all this until I started to think more about why it was so healing and why I kept turning to the ocean to return and surf.
Now I know that when we spoke last time, you told me that you actually talked to your father while you're on the board.
Yeah.
What are those conversations like? Just give us a little,
So I talk and I sing. So I've actually recently started wearing like they're waterproof earphones. So I often get music, and my dad had no tone. He couldn't sing to save his life, but he loved to sing. I used to get answering machine messages from him where we talk all the day. He was a wonderful sounding board for me, and he'd often call and leave me messages checking in or singing a Motown song on my answering machine that I still have those and listen to them. So music was a big part of our life and our experience. And so I have that with me sometimes. But really it's an opportunity to bring him out there again and to just share in my life, because one of the things I miss the most, I think what many people miss the most, is being able to pick that phone up and call that special someone to share a happy moment of your life together, or just share an everyday moment and just to say hi and I love you. And to not have that anymore, it's the thing that I often miss the most. So when I'm out there, I'll tell him about my day, wish he was here, tell him about what's happening with my daughter, sing songs, laugh, just have him be a part of my life again in that way. And it's a place where there aren't distractions, there's no phone. It's just me sitting and seeing his name out there on the board, feeling like we're on another adventure again. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. And I'm so grateful to have those moments with him.
That is very beautiful. Now you mentioned
Thank
his name on the board. At some point you wrote his name on your board or on the surfboard. What
you.
led to that moment?
Well, it was it was unexpected for me, really. I As I said, I was, struggling for a few years. And I think when I flipped that switch from only feeling connected to him through the last memory, which is the pain of his death, to realizing there's still so much love there and all the memories and the bond that we shared of adventure, it was okay. Let me start leaning more into the positive side of things and honoring him in a way that felt natural, that felt that it was connecting to him, and that was through adventure. So at the time, as I explained, I was surfing a lot, and it just made sense for me to take him out there for one last adventure. And so that's what I did. I just wrote his name on the board, not like the first time. I just thought, well, his name's on a board. What is that going to feel like? I don't know what's going to feel like, but it's just a name on a board. So I'm going to write it. My dad's name's on a board, and we're going out of the ocean. But what happened was something else. It was transformative. It was, I felt happy. I felt connected, and that happiness was something that was missing in my life for a long time after he passed away. And it seems so simple. And I often think that with the project too. It's so simple a thing to just write someone's name on a board, but often that's what we fear the most is that our loved ones are going to be forgotten. So the opportunity to say his name, to see his name doing something that I love to do in a place that we had many memories together, I just felt happy. But it was totally unexpected. There was nothing planned about it at all.
Well, I love this story because in my own personal experience, when I had a cousin who died young, she died of suicide, and it was really difficult because we were close, and it was just really really difficult. And something that really helped me was continuing that, learning how to continue that relationship. I would say that that was the number one uh, thing that helped me, is to
Mm,
continue that relationship, and continue conversations. Even, I mean, I talk to her all the time,
okay.
and that's what you're doing. You've set, it's almost like you're, like, for me, I journey. I meditate, and I do my visits with my loved one.
Mhm.
Some people call it journeying. That's my own thing, my way of doing it. It sounds very similar to what you do, and it really, that switched the way I processed my grief.
Absolutely. I think connection is what's really important. Is everybody's going to have a connection to a loved one in a different way. And I think a lot of times we shy away from that because it's so painful. But I think if you can really lean into it, you can find a lot of peace and comfort there, because it is a place of happiness that connected the two of you. And that's what I did. For us, it was adventure. For someone else, it may be something completely different. But like, I encourage people to do exactly that, because it's finding that connection that I think will lead to some positive ways to process your grief.
And I think that, it's finding that connection, but I also think it's stepping outside yourself. As you know, and what you've spoken about in our society, it is so
Hmm.
taboo, to like I had to get over myself and say, no, this isn't silly. Having conversations with Heather isn't
Right.
silly. And so that was in our society, we do a horrible job of supporting people who are grieving, and just understanding grief. So,
We don't. Yeah. There was no guidebook for it.
yep,
And, unless it's happening to you all the time, as we talked about with love, I had my heart broken many times, or, vice versa. And so you learn how to do it with grief. It's not something that we have, and it's something we have to learn how to navigate. And unfortunately,
yep,
when that's happening, it's hard to do.
yeah. Now, when did this experience of your father's name on a board move from just being your father's name on a board to something that you thought that other families would like to do, that you wanted to include or give the option to people to include them in
Mm.
this?
It all sort of happened around the same time, I guess. So I was in the water and I was feeling connected to my father for the very first time in a very long time. But it was also, peak COVID, and I'd had my father, lost my dog, best friend of 15 years, two aunts, grandmother, and I'd heard that with so many of my friends and seen it so much online that people are having a really hard time honoring their loved ones, especially then when, like, I wasn't able to cross over the border. We weren't able to go to funerals. It was really difficult for so many people. And so when I was out there in the water and all of a sudden I felt connected to him, I thought, you know, if this was healing for me, and that was a lot of the connection to my dad, feeling that was healing for me, maybe this would be inspiring to other people to find that connection to their loved one. It wasn't necessarily the expectation that, okay, this worked for me, it's going to work for everyone, but it was certainly an opportunity, that epiphany for me that, hey, this could be something that helps other people at least step outside themselves and find that, right? Move away from feeling paralyzed in the grief and into something that is on the path to healing. So I came out of the water and I put the board down on the beach. I ran to my car and got my phone, recorded a quick video, not with the expectation that everybody's going to want to do what I did, but really maybe this will be inspiring to other people to find their own path. Got home, posted the video on TikTok, and the next morning woke up and, there was 10,000 people that had written on in comments about it because it somehow resonated with them. And I think that was in part due to the time that we were all feeling so isolated and disconnected, because grief in itself leaves you feeling very isolated. And I think especially during that time, that was magnified. And so to see this person who's offering to help in that way, I think really resonated with people. And so that's how it started, but it wasn't with the expectation that it would. It was just, here's a moment that worked for me. Hopefully you'll find yours.
And for people who are hearing about for the first time, can you tell us what the One Last Wave project is? Just give us the lowdown.
Yeah, sure. So it's, really just a way to use what was helpful for me, which is that healing power of the ocean to help anybody, families, individuals who are on the grief journey, struggling with the loss of a loved one. And simply put, I just write the names of a lost loved one on these big surfboards that in themselves have become pieces of art, which I think is a really important aspect of it. But write these names on surfboards, and then we paddle them out to catch a symbolic last wave. And it's a way to honor them in nature, in a place that's very healing, and in many cases a place that was really important for them and for their families as well. So create these boards, and it for me, blends the ocean and art, which I've found through this whole journey of mine are such profound connectors for those grieving. So the symbolism of the ocean is something that connects us all physically. We can see that. Art is a little bit different. Art for me, especially in the times in my life where I was heartbroken, dealing with heavy emotions, I always turned to art, whether that was music or poetry, because often the artists themselves are creating these works during very emotional times for themselves. So we're innately connecting to it. It resonates deeply with us. So it's another way of connecting us. So the boards that we create are all handcrafted boards, beautiful artwork on many of them, created from the earth with our loved ones' names on them as a way to continue to say their name, to honor them in places that are very meaningful to us all, healing to us all, and connect us all. So it builds this sense of community through surfing, which nobody really expected it to do, but it really is something beautiful.
It's really interesting because I've been on your site and I see the differences in surfboard and the
Mm.
design, and they're very, very like you'd one that's wood. You have a couple that are wood, like really look
Yep.
like wood, and I personally love wood,
Mm-hmm.
and they're beautiful. They're absolutely gorgeous. How
Thank you.
do you get the ideas for the design? Do you work with um, like a group of people come together and say this? Like, how do you get the ideas? How do you design these?
Everyone's a little bit different as you noticed, and each board and the process of it is a little bit different. But usually, I'll either have a location in mind, or I'll connect with a shaper who wants to be a part of the project, or in some cases, which is beautiful, it'll be a family who's had a loved one on a previous board who then wants to help others who are grieving by creating a board themselves in the location where they are. And that's what's happening with our 10th board. Once the boards are sort of the location itself is solidified, then I'll find a way to design the boards that incorporates either the colors of the area, it can be the country colors or the actual landscape. And then the shapers will find ways to create a design, a shape of the board that suits the area that it'll be surfed in. So each surf has a different break. So different, lengths of boards, widths of boards, all the design aspects of it. So for instance, our sixth board that was released in Santa Cruz was actually built out of fallen redwood trees from the woods in the area. And it was handcrafted by a local, really an artist. He's a shaper, but he's really an artist. And then we had the names written on it and it's taken there. So it's from the earth, names are on there, out into the ocean as a way of celebrating life. And the whole process of it is just spectacular. And then that board itself became a real piece of art and was in a museum here in Rhode Island for a little while. Just spectacular. So it's really neat to see each one's done a little bit differently, but that's sort of the idea of how it goes.
Now, and do the families of these, because you could have lots of names. I mean, it looks like you have dozens, if not more, names on some of these boards. Do they come out? Do they when you when you go into the ocean, or when a person who is on the board goes out into the ocean, um,
Yeah.
is the family, or do all the family show up too?
So you're right. The board that we're releasing in California in a few weeks has over 2,600 names on it. And I think early on in the project, I was a little bit torn because how I experienced that first launch of the board, the first four boards I released here in Rhode Island, and then we started expanding around the world. Those first four boards, the second they were done at the Shapers, I'd drive sometimes 12 hours to pick up the board, come back. And the second I got home, I went right out into the ocean with the board because that's how I experienced it the first time with my father. It was a moment of peace and solitude to honor the loved ones on the boards. And I didn't want that to be not taken away from in a sense by having it be all about film crew and cameras and people and noise. I just wanted it to be a peaceful moment. But I understood the importance of families being there and seeing their loved ones go out. Now you can always visit a board at any time, so the boards continue to be served, so you can always visit a board at any time after the fact. But now, the last 3 or 4 boards we've had and launched, we do have families there. So if you're able to make it, some people fly from all the way around the world to make it there, and it really is a beautiful moment to be able to see that and be a part of the community that you've been connected to online, and now you're able to see that and have your loved one go out there. And it's a very emotional moment for everybody, and hugging and in tears, but it's also happy because it's life. It's something the boards have always meant to be an active memorial to our loved ones. And so that's a big part of it. It's not supposed to be such sadness, but almost in a way positive to see your loved one's name being said, being out there on a wave with like the thunderous current going beneath your feet as you're out there in the waves. It's supposed to be something that brings life to everybody. And so it is beautiful to see the crowds show up now for it. And I have family members that come years after the fact. Sometimes it takes a little while till they're ready to actually visit the boards. But every week I have people come visit me and I bring the boards out and show them to them. So they do it in a little bit of a different way where it's just themselves in the board. And sometimes that's more positive for people and sometimes they want to be a part of the group. So
Now,
really one or the other.
are you the person that goes out onto the board?
The first few I did, then once we started, so in South Africa, in England, even in Florida and California, somebody else will be riding the boards. I'd love to be able to, but the project got to a point where I didn't want it to be I didn't want it to be about me. I wanted it to be about the people who were there. And so like the lender's family who are releasing this 10th board, their son is on the board and I believe their daughter and I think Rod the husband is going to be taking that board out as well. So
Mm.
that'll really be a moment for them as a family to do that. And I didn't want to take away from that in any way. I wanted that to be them. A lot of people want me to take the boards out, but I think it's more important for other people to do it now and let the project grow organically and be a part of everybody and not just me taking it out. But I do like the boards that I have 5 boards with me here at home and I take them out every single week. I rotate through the boards so they're
Amazing.
continuously surfed and that's really the idea is just making sure that our loved ones' memories and names live on in that way. And that's my experience with it surfing now all the time.
Yeah, that's a responsibility.
It is, but it's something I love to do. I mean, I love to surf and I
Yeah.
love to be able to help people in this way. And so it's really a positive experience for me.
Now, how do families submit a name of their loved ones to get on a board? What's that process like?
Sure. Yeah, they can either go to our website, it's onelastwayproject.com, or any of the videos I post on our social media allows people to comment just on a video or they can send a direct message. And if it's through the website, which is where I always encourage people to go anyways, because it has all the information, including our socials, it's really a first and last name of your loved one and a story. Because for me, it's really important to understand it's not just a name. There's a story behind each person on the board. And I want to understand who it is that I'm carrying out there. And so families will often share a few paragraphs, pages, longer sometimes, stories of their loved ones. And it helps me understand the whole the whole process more for them as well and to connect and form a more personal relationship, which is what's always been important for me in this is it didn't matter how many people were submitting, if it was one person, 10 people, 20,000 people. I wanted each one of those to have it be a personal experience for them and to be a part of the community and feel connected in that way because we all need that. We all deserve that.
It's so fascinating. You should, I don't know if you do, but you should like have a book for each board, or a book for board, book
Yeah.
of boards with people's stories, because it's so beautiful
I've
and
thought about
profound.
it. I've certainly, yeah, I've thought about doing something like that for
Yeah.
each board. It's just maybe we'll see. Maybe when it later on, I'll, I'll come back and do it all. But it is a wonderful idea.
Yeah, exactly. Now, have any of those stories, or are there any stories that have really stuck with you, or any experiences with these families that have just, you're like, oh, wow.
Yeah,
I'm sure there's lots, but does any?
I would say the reality is all of them.
Yeah.
There isn't. I hate to sort of take away from any one of them because every single message that I get is so impactful for me. It's someone grieving, and I understand what that feels like, that has shown the courage of taking the step to honor their loved one and share a story with me, a stranger, to do this thing of putting them on a board and taking them out in the ocean. So every one of those stories is incredibly important to me. And I sit with each of them every time I get one in. And I'm
Mm.
just blown away by so much of the love that's shared and how wonderful these individuals were. And it's heartbreaking at the same time. I think what's what's really been incredible for me to see is, because I experienced it as well. When I was going through my hardest moments, I didn't feel like I could live. I didn't feel like I could leave the house or do the things that felt normal anymore. So there's been so many stories shared of people who are feeling the same thing, who may not have even written to me for 3 years after they submitted a loved one. And then all of a sudden, they felt the urge to see their father, brother, sister, son, daughter on the board. And they would pick up, fly halfway around the world, drive 8 hours to see a name on a board. That's, I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that people like had that courage to do it, but they did. And I see these stories all the time from the people who have visited the boards, and they'll come back and tell me afterwards. And they go see the board and see their loved one and go put their feet in the ocean, touch their name on the board, back in the car, back in the plane, fly back to their life. And I think what it gives them life. It gives them the permission to live again. And I think that for me has been so inspiring to see that the project has given people life through that. And so
Mm.
those are the stories that resonate with me. You know, I've had ones where people lived thousands of miles apart, and all of a sudden they decided to go for a hike on a trail somewhere in the mountains, and they crossed paths with someone who was also wearing a One Last Wave t-shirt that day, and they found out that both of their daughters are on the board, or their loved ones met in university, or these families will meet in a grief group. I had one where, she was traveling to a different country and went to a grief group with a friend, and in that grief group met someone who had a loved one on the same board as her loved one. And stuff like that just really hits you. Like, you understand the impact the project is really having. And some of the hardest ones were, I've had a lot of people write to me who were in palliative care, and their dying wish was to be on the board. And for some people, it was they had actually submitted their loved one. And then 2, 3 years later, they said, now it's my turn. I'm dying. I want to be on your next board. And we continue having conversations for weeks, sometimes months after they'd submitted their name. And then all of a sudden the conversations would stop. And I understood what it meant, but it was just how beautiful that they found comfort knowing that their names as well will live on, that they'll continue to hear their names being spoken through these boards out in the ocean. And that gave them comfort in those moments. And I can't tell you how proud I am that they felt that was what was of comfort to them, that I was able to offer something in those last moments for them. It's just beautiful.
It is really, really beautiful. Thank you. Um, what do you think your father would say about the Last Wave project?
I know what he would say. He wouldn't say anything. He was a man of few words, and he spoke through his love and his understanding. He gave the best hugs and had the greatest smile. And what he offered to me was a place that I could always go and feel comfortable sharing with him and not judged. But he was incredibly successful human being in everything he did. He won at everything. And you would never know it because he never spoke a word of it. He was such a humble man. And that's beautiful. And so I know he wouldn't say anything, but I hope that he'd be proud and that I could have a hug and a smile from him. That would be the most meaningful thing I could receive.
I'm sure he is very, very proud.
Yeah.
Dan, thank you so much for being here and being vulnerable and telling us your story and creating this project. This has been a real gift. This interview. Thank you so much. How can people learn more about the One Last Wave project and get involved if they want to?
Or write me a message. Go to our website, onelastwaveproject.com, or find us on social media, One Last Wave Project. Comment, direct message. I respond to everything, and I'd be more than happy to connect with them. And want to thank you as well for helping share our story and for all the work that you do.
Thank you. Listeners, one of the things I hope you take from today's conversation is that there is no single right way to move through grief. Sometimes healing happens in places we might not expect. For Dan, it was the ocean. For you, it might be nature, movement, creativity, conversation, or quiet reflection. What matters is finding a way that allows you to stay connected to the love you shared and to carry that forward in a way that feels meaningful to you. Thank you for joining us. If you have any questions, please comment below or reach out to me directly. And if you have found this conversation to be helpful, please like, share, comment, and subscribe. This is Traci Arieli from Comforting Closure, wishing you peace and comfort in your journey. Until next time, take care.